Well, hello and welcome to Pass the Mic with Texas Realtors. I'm your chairman, Marvin Jolly. Today we have a special guest whose name is Laurie Benner. Laurie is the Associate Vice President of Programs at the National Fair Housing Alliance, also known as NAFA. Laurie has agreed to join us for Pass the Mic today and share the goal and the vision of the organization with us. Laurie, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Marvin, for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Great. Well, Laurie, number one, the National Fair Housing Alliance is the voice of fair housing. And as the former director of housing programs at Maryland Realtors, you have a unique perspective that you bring to the work. Can you share more about the areas of the focus for NAFA right now and where realtors fit in?
Sure. And I'll answer the second part first about where realtors fit in. The answer is everywhere. Realtors and fair housing and housing opportunity are intrinsically connected. They always have been, for good and bad. The emphasis, I think, right now is on the good, progress and how to move forward in a positive way to rectify some of the past things that we don't really have so much to be proud of about. But I'll share a confession with you. I was with Maryland Realtors for 6.5 years, and up until about my last 2 years, I had never heard of the National Fair Housing Alliance before. And I've heard that repeatedly from my Realtor Association colleagues. And I think there's a huge opportunity for NAFA to work both with individual realtors and state and local associations. Organizationally, we have a strong relationship with NAR, but I'd love to see more done on a smaller scale with programs and conversations just like we're having right now. And I'm happy to tell you that as part of NAFA's strategic planning process, which is going on right now, we're including how to better work with our realtor friends. I think my unique perspective stems from my nonprofit and philanthropic background, which optimistically and possibly sometimes naively thinks that everyone should support equal opportunity. My experience with the realtor family has given me more depth of perspective politically and socially, which helps us promote and approach these partnerships armed with knowledge that will help us reach a broader audience. In terms of NAFA's primary focuses, they have long included advocacy and public policy work, education and outreach, investigation and enforcement, which, yes, sometimes includes litigation, and training and consulting. So we also act as a trade association of sorts for fair housing agency members all across the country. And I'm happy to say that we have 6 member organizations in Texas. So we also engage in special programs and initiatives to address discrimination and racial inequities, such as our Keys Unlock Dreams and our Tech Equity initiatives. And we partner with national organizations like the Black Homeownership Collaborative on major far-reaching efforts, such as the collaboration's goal to see 3 million net new Black homeowners by 2030. They just recently made a big announcement about this on June 18th, and I had several realtors reach out to me to ask how they could get involved. So I immediately reached out to Brian Green at NAR to start talking about it. So the short answer is that realtors can get involved in fair housing efforts anytime, as they should, but some of the deeper work in terms of engagement is kind of still in progress.
We're also joined by our CEO and president, Travis Kessler. Travis?
Yeah, so Laurie, thank you for joining us today. And you're spearheading the Keys to Unlock Dreams initiative. And I saw on your website that Houston is one of the locations. And so could you talk about how you're expanding this initiative in Texas, and tell us what this program entails, the goals, and how we at Texas Realtors can help?
Sure, Travis. Our Keys Unlock Dreams initiative is a brand new nationwide initiative related to homeownership for Black and Brown individuals and families. Initially, we're focusing on 10 key cities, and those are Columbus, Detroit, Memphis, New Orleans, Baltimore, Oakland, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and as you mentioned, Houston. There's also been some talk about possibly expanding to the Dallas area as well. So the initiative has 5 main goals, and those are to remove structural barriers that perpetuate racial inequality, to expand affordable and fair housing options, to prevent an unbalanced recovery from the COVID pandemic, to empower prospective homebuyers with education and resources, and finally, to help close the racial wealth and homeownership gaps. So we'll be, we have kind of a 5 different pillars that go along with how we're going to reach those goals. And research is a big part of that. We'll be engaging in partnership with Zillow and with the Urban Institute to do a deep dive into each one of these cities. Another one of the research components is in 2018, Zillow completed a study to align with the 50th anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. And this study examined 10 metro areas, one of those being Houston, for community disparities related to financial services, health services, healthy food access, and fitness and outdoor recreation amenities. You might not be surprised to hear that non-white areas had far less access than white areas. So we just updated that research, and sadly not too much has changed in this past 3 years. So we're looking at racial metrics such as the racial wealth and homeownership and home value gaps, home price trends, housing supply, credit score data, and things like that to kind of help push the initiative forward. We'll also be looking at assessments of fair housing and community health needs assessments to help inform the advocacy and policy work. So we'll also be hosting events in each city, which I'm super excited about because I've never been to Houston. It'll be my first trip there. So one of the events will be industry focused, like a one-day housing conference or symposium, and the other will be a consumer-facing event because we want home buyers to feel prepared and confident, educated about the home buying process. So we will definitely be reaching out to our realtor friends to help us out and to participate in those events. So finally, kind of as I alluded to before, this entire effort is based on partnerships with housing organizations, nonprofits, city and county government, realtor and realtist associations, corporations, lending institutions, and all kinds of community-based groups. It's really designed to lift up the goals and aspirations of our partners and all work hand in hand towards these goals.
Laurie, you mentioned that one of the goals is removing structural barriers that perpetuate racial inequality. We know that structural barriers exist everywhere in our industry. What advice can you share to help us identify these barriers, especially when we can't see them ourselves?
That's a big question, for sure. I think from the real estate industry perspective, we tend to think of fair housing through an almost exclusively discrimination-focused lens. But at NAFA, we consider fair housing to be a broader civil rights issue. When people are offered equitable resources and opportunities to secure safe, affordable housing, it's an absolute game changer. The outcome is not only good for the individuals themselves, but for all of us. Communities are stronger and healthier and more economically prosperous. Opportunities or lack of opportunity determine where people live, and where people live determine their access to, technology, healthcare, transportation, education, employment, and so on. And it further determines personal and generational wealth. So fair housing has implications beyond just discrimination and housing opportunity, which of course, as we know, disproportionately impacts Black and Brown communities. So all of those things I just mentioned have historic inequities that can still be felt today. Educating ourselves on the history is really key to understanding why the industry is taking the steps that it is today. We've seen NAR and Chicago and Atlanta associations make really bold statements and apologizing, but not without a fair amount of pushback. And to that point, racism and discrimination is not as obvious as it once was. There's no more redlining maps or whites only signs hanging on storefronts. Most of it is completely invisible. And I'll give an example. Think about how lending underwriting is primarily now done via automated systems. We'd love to think that computers can discriminate, but unfortunately, bias is baked into many of these algorithmic systems. NAFA is doing some extensive work on tech bias right now. The US has a dual credit market driven by centuries of discriminatory practices. And we see that in the demographics of unbanked or underbanked, and who tends to use mainstream financial services base versus fringe financial services, which tend to be predatory. So I mentioned before how communities of color have less access, and that kind of leads into that. So when we talk about barriers, we're talking about enormous systems created over time that need deep efforts to repair, which can feel daunting even for those actively working on it. On the individual level, particularly, for our realtor friends and those in the housing industry, I would encourage everyone to just kind of simply pay closer attention. I realize that every transaction has dozens of moving pieces, but the devil is kind of in the details, as they say. Do you see your clients of color with an appraisal or loan terms that don't quite look right? Speak up, ask questions. Do you have a seller who is subtly or even blatantly trying to exclude certain people from buying their home? Don't work with them. A commission is not worth compromising your ethical and professional obligations, and certainly isn't worth losing your license. And I think the final piece is that word we keep hearing over and over again lately, and that's diversity. We don't know what we don't know. If you don't have a particularly varied professional network, change that. Once you start developing relationships and friendships, and you hear about challenges of other individuals and communities, it can help you be more tuned in to what to look for and how to be a better ally. And I'll close by saying, speaking of which, I absolutely love what Texas Realtors is doing right now on social media with education on topics relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would love to see more state associations leaning in the way you guys are.
Yeah, thank you, Laurie. That's been a great initiative for us as well, and led by Tiffany Wu and our staff and our diversity committee, and they've done an outstanding job in communication and education in that realm. So Laurie, you've given us a lot of great information. How can realtors get the information? Can you tell us your website or just contact information on how to get more information?
Sure, absolutely. So NAFA's website is nationalfairhousing.org. And from there, you can find all of our initiatives. You can find membership information. There's a lot of blogs and content on a lot of the topics that I just described. And I can be found on that website as well for anyone that wants to reach out and get more involved. And of course, as our initiative moves forward, and we're getting ready to gear things up in Houston, I'll definitely be back in touch with all of you. I really appreciate your support.
All right. Well, Laurie, Marvin and I have truly enjoyed meeting with you today. We have enjoyed the Pass the Mic conversation with the National Fair Housing Alliance. You all have great comprehensive programs, resources, and information. We want to wish you well, and we at Texas Realtors look forward to being a great partner with you.
Terrific.
Thanks for joining us today.